or the hour. Ellison had the presence of mind to keep a personal trial diary, which is now a book. Break the Wheel, Ending the Cycle of Police Violence. The book publishes today, and I'm honored to have today Minnesota AG Keith Ellison. Keith Ellison, how are you, my friend?
Hey, great to be with you, my friend. How you doing today?
Man, if I complained, I'd be an ingrate. I am delighted to be alive, delighted to be on air, delighted to be in conversation with you for the hour, and thank you. I've written a few books in my life. I know what Pub Day is like,
Yes,
and
you have.
yeah, I've done a few. So I know what Pub Day is like, and I'm honored. I'm honored that you chose to be on KBLA Talk 1580 on the day your book actually dropped. So thank you, Keith, for the opportunity to talk to you. I appreciate you, man.
Well, thank you, and congrats on your own very important anniversary that's coming up.
No, thank you, man. We appreciate it. Almost 2 years of this black-owned and operated talk radio station, the only one west of Mississippi, and we're excited about
Sure.
about celebrating what we've done in 2 years and getting ready for year three. So thank you for that. Let me make the most of our time. I want to jump right in. I was thinking last night, A.G. Ellison, about the following. We've talked on this program in recent days about the Daniel Penny trial forthcoming in New York City. This is the white brother who choked Jordan Neely, the black brother, to death on the subway train. I know Alvin Bragg. I love Alvin Bragg. You know, he's a good brother. But one could call it taking his time to make sure his ducks were aligned, and I am mad at him for that. But as you know, there were protests all over New York because it took a week for the Manhattan DA's office to bring charges against Daniel Penny for the choking death of Jordan Neely. And as you also know, the Republicans have rallied behind Daniel Penny, and they're raising millions of dollars for his defense. That's another issue. But it took a week to bring those charges against the person who killed Jordan Neely, choked him to death on that subway train. That's in New York. Let me go down to Georgia. Ahmaud Arbery.
Mm-hmm.
It took a long time,
Sure.
as you recall.
Yeah.
I ain't telling you nothing you don't know. I'm saying this for the benefit of framing this for the audience. It took a long time for charges to be brought against those three persons, those three white males who killed Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia as he was running. And that thing got passed from one DA to another DA. It got passed around. Nobody wanted to bring those charges against Ahmaud Arbery. That's in Georgia. Let me go to Florida. It took a while for charges to be brought against George Zimmerman in the killing of Trayvon Martin. What's my point? You get it. Oftentimes when it comes to black folk being murdered, it takes the adjudicating authorities, those with the control, some time to bring charges. Why and how did you come to the decision to move forward with those charges against Chauvin and the other officers when you know full well that prosecuting cops is not easy business?
Well, in a word, we looked at the facts, we looked at the law, and it became clear to us. We did ask folks for a week or so to give us a chance to go through the file, but it didn't take a long time. You could add to the list Laquan McDonald.
Sure.
I mean, in Chicago, that case, I think 4 years went by between the time that the shooting incident happened and the charges were brought. There's no doubt that you're right, and it's why people have a distrust of our criminal justice system, and it's part and parcel of, why, we feel we have an unequal justice system, and why the system lacks legitimacy if there's not a sense of equal justice under the law. And so that's kind of why I wrote this book there, Tavis, because we're trying to push this country toward equal justice under the law. We're trying to say, look, this is your constitutional promise. This is what y'all signed up for. This is the time to live up to it. And so, we took our time to make sure the charges were right, but we didn't take 4 years or 4 months or any of that kind of stuff. George Floyd was killed on May 26th. Within about a week, we were moving out quick. So because it didn't take that long to see that the facts warranted the charges: second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter.
We're going to talk for the entire hour here about your book, so we'll get into that, I promise, in a moment here. But I just want to ask some broad questions to begin, and then we'll jump into that straight away. When you look back on it now, we are approaching the anniversary of the death of George Floyd. When you look back on it now, and what you and your office were able to do, and for that matter, when others got involved on civil rights violations, they were successful as well. But when you look back on that, to my mind, this may be regarded into the future as a watershed moment in holding police accountable. I am not naive. It is still more difficult than not to successfully prosecute cops. I get that. But I think it's going to be a watershed moment historically when we look back on it. That's my take. When you look back on how successful these prosecutions were, what's your read in the rearview mirror?
Well, honestly, I'm really grateful that we worked hard and we got those convictions for the sake of the family, for the sake of the victims. But if I'm real straight with you, brother, and I can only be real straight with you, I'm thinking that, like, look, why haven't we passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act yet? What's taking the people in Congress so long to deliver simple accountability on their part? I mean, our team stepped forward and did what they were supposed to do. The family stepped up and did what they were supposed to do. The protesters stepped up and did what they were supposed to do. And yet Congress has not stepped and did what it was supposed to do. Now, I don't blame Cory Booker, and I certainly don't blame Karen Bass. I think they did all they could do. But, what about the other side of the aisle? They were supposed to do the right thing, and they did not. So I guess what I'm left with, brother, really, quite honestly, is a sense that, the people who are in a position to make meaningful social, political, legislative changes won't do it, while those of us who operate at less than a national level are doing all that we can, including jurors, including journalists. You're reporting on this story. You're having me on today. You're trying to get the word out. But these guys have got to move. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is not passed yet. Should have been passed 3 years ago.
Yeah. Our guest in this hour is Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. As I mentioned earlier, he had the presence of mind, and I'm jealous of Keith because we've known each other for years, but I'm jealous of A.G. Ellison. I got to stop calling him Keith. He is the Attorney General. He's not just my friend. He's the Attorney General in this conversation. A.G. Ellison had the presence of mind to do something I wish I'd done a couple times in my life. I've written a bunch of books, but there were certain moments in my life where I wish I had done better at keeping a journal because that would have allowed for other books to have been written, or perhaps the ones I've written to have been written better if I had the presence of mind as he did to keep a journal. Well, his journal is now a book. It's out today. It's called Break the Wheel, Ending the Cycle of Police Violence. And I want to get all up in his business, into his personal journals when we come forward with A.G. Keith Ellison out of Minnesota. But right now he's on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about. Good thing we've got 3 hours. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Maisha Cairo here for KBLA Talk 1580. We're live in Los Angeles at JP Morgan Chase's Advancing Black Wealth Tour. And I'm speaking to some of the attendees today to see why it was so important for them to be here.
Yeah, this is Lathan and Tyler. Main reason that's very important for me to be here is just to leave a legacy for my kids. Black wealth, generational wealth is what we need in our community. Oh, Chase, someone has to take the lead. They're showing, big business like Chase cares, and they're putting their money where their mouth is at. So it's good to see, big institution like Chase, giving a lifting hand, to the community. And, you got to respect that. It makes me want to bank with Chase and, give them, another look if I go to another institution. I actually see what Chase is doing for the community.
That's right. Chase is doing their part to help advance Black wealth. For more money support, tune in every day from 12 to 2 to KBLA Talk 1580's Midday Money Chain, right here.
Moments like seeing my son's team cheer him on mean a lot to me. But after being diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, or MBC, which is breast cancer that has spread to other parts of the body, they mean even more. I take Ibrance, palbociclib.
Ibrance 125 milligram tablets with an aromatase inhibitor is for adults with HR-positive, HER2-negative MBC as the first hormonal-based therapy. Ask your doctor about Ibrance and visit Ibrance.com. Ibrance may cause low white blood cell counts that may lead to serious infections. Ibrance may cause severe inflammation of the lungs. Both of these can lead to death. Tell your doctor right away if you have new or worsening symptoms, including trouble breathing, shortness of breath, cough, or chest pain. Before taking Ibrance, tell your doctor if you have fever, chills, or other signs of infection, liver or kidney problems, are or plan to become pregnant, or are breastfeeding. Common side effects include low red blood cell and low platelet counts, infections, tiredness, nausea, sore mouth, abnormalities in liver blood tests, diarrhea, hair thinning or loss, vomiting, rash, and loss of appetite.
On Saturday, May 27th and Sunday, May 28th, join Pastor Shep Crawford and other local houses of worship for the Apology Tour. Details about the Saturday, May 27th press conference and the Sunday, May 28th walkout are available at theapologytour.com. The Apology Tour is a united effort to engage the community and serve the least among us by tearing down the walls of division, misunderstanding, and tension between the church and the community. The Apology Tour helps to address the impact of the pandemic, which created a greater distance between the beloved community and the Black church. The Apology Tour invites participating local ministries to walk out of the building and into the community for 1 to 4 hours on Sunday, May 28th at 12 noon to provide services and offer giveaways reflective of the community's needs assessment and priorities. For more information or to join this call to action, please visit theapologytour.com, changing the community through the spirit of God's love.
Interrogating your assumptions and expanding your inventory of ideas. Let's get back to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
This Thursday is the third anniversary of the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We are honored in this hour to have the Attorney General for that great state of Minnesota, Keith Ellison, as our guest. He has a new book out today. It's called Break the Wheel, Ending the Cycle of Police Violence. This book is made up of many of his personal journal entries that he was keeping, his personal diary, if you will, during the ordeal that his office was bringing these charges and prosecuting the case against Derek Chauvin and those other do-nothing officers. I'm honored to have A.G. Ellison on with us in this hour. Let me come right to the book now. We'll spend the rest of our hour unpacking this. I am curious as to whether or not you always keep a journal, A.G. Ellison, or whether or not this was something that was out of the ordinary for you.
No, it's kind of a practice for me.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of always keep journals, because, and they're not necessarily for a book. It's just like,
Sure.
I like the idea of like, okay, so we were talking about this 2 weeks ago. Let me go back to that and say what. Flip through it, see what's there. And a lot of times we get ideas.
You went off mic for me. I know you're on your phone, but all of a sudden we lost your audio. All of a sudden, let me get Miles to get you back on audio here, so we can hear you clearly, and we'll continue our conversation in just a second here. Again, our guest is Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, and we want to get this phone line straight. His book again is out today. It's called Break the Wheel, Ending the Cycle of Police Violence. I can tell you that on Thursday, as a matter of fact, we have a number of guests. On the actual anniversary of George Floyd's murder. We have a number of guests on our program on Thursday to help us commemorate that anniversary 3 years later and talk about where we are in this moment when it comes to police accountability in this country. You heard Keith Ellison, Attorney General Ellison, say moments ago that my word, not his, that he finds it, we all find it, I think, shameful. That's the right word, shameful, frankly, that Congress has not as yet passed that George Floyd Policing Act. That's a real problem. And so a lot has been done in this country. I think progress in some ways has been made in the 3 years. Believe it or not, it's been 3 years already. That just seems really fast to me. I don't know about you. But a lot has been accomplished in the 3 years since the murder of George Floyd. And a lot has not been done, including, of course, at the top of that list, the George Floyd Policing Act. Has not passed. But we'll talk about that. We'll have an assessment on Thursday on the actual anniversary of his death 3 years ago. We'll have a great conversation on Thursday about where we are, where we are not, and frankly, the reality that so many corporations and others who promised to do better after his murder are doing 180s. We were talking just the other day about diversity, equity, and inclusion. All these companies that made all these commitments to do better, support black media, et cetera, all kind of folk now are doing 180s on what they promised to do 3 years ago. That conversation on Thursday, the third anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. I think we got the AG back now. His phone line should be working well. So I'd ask you, and we had lost your audio. I'd ask you, AG Ellison, whether or not it was a practice for you to keep a journal or not, or whether this was something uniquely different.
Yeah, I keep journals on nearly everything. I just fill up notebooks all the time. I got boxes of them. My wife asked me, how many we got to get rid of all this stuff, man. And I'm like, hon, so I just keep them, man. And I make it a practice. And, sometimes I make lists, to-do lists. Sometimes I just write impressions of how I was feeling. Because you can dig back in your calendars to figure out what you were doing. Yeah. But you need a journal to figure out to remember how you were feeling, right? And so I just keep them, and I recommend it as a practice because it certainly has helped me. It's add to my junk pile, but has not failed me in terms of just recollecting what was going on inside my heart and head at a given moment.
Yeah. So give me a sense. I think I get it, but give me a sense then of how your wife's protestations notwithstanding, how going back into those boxes and recalling what you felt on any given day as you all were prosecuting Derek Chauvin. Give me a sense of how that aided and abetted in the writing of the book, Break the Wheel.
Well, there were times, we had internal differences of opinion, right? And I probably would have forgot those. And of course, when you get a lot of smart people in a room, they're going to have difference of opinions. But I believe that all of us together are smarter than any one of us alone. And so I tell you this, one thing that we didn't all agree on is whether or not 9-year-old Judea Reynolds should testify. And I remember thinking about that. I remember, us just, kind of going over that, because whenever I lead a group, I never say, I'm the boss, this is the way it's going to be. I say, what does everybody think? Tell me why I'm wrong. And I remember thinking to myself, the kids in Birmingham, Alabama got out there and they marched for their freedom. 9 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old, because they were under Jim Crow segregation too. And so part of the liberation, part of the experience of freeing yourself got to be shared by all, older people, mid-aged people, and even the kids, because, Judea had to witness all of that. And then it had the effect, Judea testifying had the effect of allowing her to be a part of accountability, which I think was something that was freeing for her. And folks thinking, oh, she's too little, she's too young. I said, well, we're going to bring her in. We're going to get her used to it. We're going to show her what the courtroom is like. We're going to tell her where she's going to sit. And she will do fine. And she did do fine. And I think she's 9, when she's 19, when she's 29, when she's 39, she will be able to remember, I helped justice happen. I helped accountability happen. And I wasn't just a bystander because I was a child. I was a part of the instrumentality of a more perfect America. And I want that for her because I think it's liberational. Yeah. I think it's something that'll help her children's children sort of heal and deal with what she witnessed in so many years.
I assume, and I recall her testimony was riveting, I assume in retrospect, and you write about it, of course, in the book, you think that was the right decision made by your team to, in fact, put this 9-year-old on the stand in that case.
I think it was the right decision because one thing it showed is that if a 9-year-old could see that what these officers were doing to George Floyd was wrong, how come those trained officers who had completed the academy didn't see it, right? I mean, we showed you had classes in CPR, you took classes in bias and unintended and implicit bias. You did all this training, and you could not see what was apparent to a child. And so that was part of how we were showing the jury that what these officers did was, in fact, unreasonable and not within the law and was a crime. And so, yeah, I'm sure that we did the right thing. But I don't have any complaints about the people who disagree with me, and I don't name them because I don't want to shame or embarrass them. I'm just trying to show that we know that we did sort through all these things. And if you're going to try to lead a group doing a complex and difficult thing, you must be open to different points of view. And people who disagree with you, they're not bad and they're not wrong. They're just trying to represent a point of view, and all points of view are necessary to get to the right answer.
Yeah. Let me try this out on you for size. I want to get your take on this. There are those who would look at the tape, the video of the murder of George Floyd, and I've said many times that I was able to watch it once, maybe twice, and I couldn't watch it anymore. And the reason I couldn't watch it is because when you get to the point of that tape where he's calling out for his mama,
Right.
I couldn't do it, man. I couldn't do it. I suspect if I were in that situation, I would have done the same thing. Somebody once asked me in an interview years ago. I've never forgotten. I've been interviewed more times than I can count, obviously, as have you. But somebody asked me a question I've only been asked once in my entire career, and that was, I don't even know where the question came from, why they asked it, but it was an arresting question. The question was, Mr. Smiley, if you were on the verge of taking your last breath, what is the last voice you'd want to hear in your ear? It's a powerful question, man. And I paused for a second, and for me, it was pretty clear. If I'm taking my last breath, the last voice I want to hear is that of my mama. I want to hear my mama's voice one last time. And I thought about that when I saw that videotape of George Floyd calling out for his mama, who we all know she was already deceased. I mean, his mama had been dead, as we say, had been gone.
Yep.
But he's still so connected to her in that moment. It was spiritual for me. It was spiritual that his mother was already deceased, and he's calling for his mother as if she's alive. He's calling for her in that moment. That was a spiritual thing for me, but I couldn't watch the tape anymore. I'm raising this because there are those who watch that tape and say the evidence was so abundantly clear that, with all due respect to Attorney General Keith Ellison, that case was a slam dunk. He should have won that case. It was a slam dunk. But you and I both know there's all kind of other cases where there was videotape, and they didn't get a conviction. It wasn't a slam dunk. I raised all that to ask whether or not there was any point in this process, as you were writing in your journals, which became this book out today, Break the Wheel, you had thoughts about whether or not this was, in fact, a slam dunk.
You know, Tavis, there was never a moment I thought it was a slam dunk, because I remember watching the state of California prosecuting those officers in the Rodney King case, and that verdict went the wrong way. I mean, 58 brutal blows. It just seemed like the most inhumane thing in the world. It seemed so obvious, and yet the jury goes the wrong way, in my opinion. But then what about in the Walter Scott case? The jury hangs, and that, you know, the officer stands there, assumes a target shooter stance, and guns that man down. And then, you know, look, in the Laquan McDonald, they do ultimately convict. The jury does, but it takes 3 years. Eric Garner has yet to see any justice. I mean, I knew that this videotape was no guarantor of anything. You know, I knew that we could not rely on the videotape. In fact, Tavis, what we did is we set up the case without the video, and then implemented the video to augment and supplement the testimony, so that what jurors were experiencing is the recounting by another human being. And then just to say, now look, to show you, I'm going to show you what I was saying, and then we put on the video. And that's how I think you've got to prosecute these cases. You cannot just say, push play, and then the case is over. Couldn't be more wrong. There was video in the Philando Castile case. You'll remember that. And clearly Philando Castile's like, hey, look, you know, you have a gun permit, and blam, 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 kills him dead, walks. So that video, you know, I never thought it was a winner. In fact, I thought what it did is it shot people's expectations sky high, which made our job that much harder.
I hear you. No, I hear you. That makes sense. That's why I was asking the question, because it's not a slam dunk just because you got videotape, as you well know. Our guest is Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. His book is out today. It's called Break the Wheel, Ending the Cycle of Police Violence. And when we come forward, I want to come right to that and ask him point blank whether or not he thinks that the success his office had in prosecuting Derek Chauvin and those other officers is part of the process of ending the cycle of police violence. I could debate him all day long with a bunch of other evidence since the murder of George Floyd that we ain't done nothing to end the cycle of police violence. But it's his book, Break the Wheel, Ending the Cycle of Police Violence. We'll talk more about it when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
The station you turn to when you've had it up to here with cultural incompetence. KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. California's Bay Area will soon be home to the world's largest semiconductor tech site. It's being built by the manufacturing company Applied Materials in Sunnyvale. That's where Vice President Kamala Harris visited yesterday to reveal the news. She says semiconductors are the brain of modern technology, calling the tiny chips essential to every electronic device used. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy is out with a warning today that social media use is a main contributor to depression, anxiety, and other problems in the nation's teenagers. Murthy's advisory urges policymakers and social media platforms to share with parents the burden of managing children's and adolescents' social media use. The Surgeon General has long been a proponent of mental health awareness. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Through Elysian Park, taking the 110 south at Stadium Way. Earlier wreck sitting on the right side. We're seeing the busy drive here as far back as that 134. And you're 60 west at Soto Street. This is Boyle Heights. Crash from earlier still sitting on the right side. We're busy from around Downey. At Water Village, the 2 south at Fletcher Drive. Second lane from the left blocked with a collision. Now we're seeing that busy commute from at least York Boulevard. Seen a hazard on the 710 north 710 approaching Cesar Chavez. Looks like some large tire debris in traffic lanes. You want to avoid that. Could cause damage to your vehicle.
I'm Howard Mackler, founder of Innovation Refunds. If you own a business and still haven't applied for the payroll tax refund, we want to pay a licensed tax attorney to see if you're eligible to receive up to $26,000 per employee. Go to getrefunds.com, getrefunds.com.
Is this the tackle? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Lakers season ended last night with their best player and one of the game's all-time greats having the ball in his hands with 4 seconds left. LeBron James had a chance to tie the game and force an overtime, but Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon blocked his shot attempt. The game-saving play helped Denver hang on for a 2-point win and sweep the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals. If Miami sweeps Boston tonight, Denver and Miami will meet up in the NBA Finals beginning June 1st. At age 38, LeBron is the oldest player to score 40 points in a playoff game. It wasn't enough to get him to his 11th NBA Finals. A chilling thought for Lakers fans now that the offseason is here. LeBron ended his post-game press conference saying these words, "I've got a lot to think about," and he said it twice. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States of America.
The story of Emmett Till and his mother is a story of a family's promise and loss and a nation's reckoning with hate, violence, and abuse of power. It's a story that was seared into our memory and our conscience, the nation's conscience, when Mrs. Till insisted that an open casket for her murdered and maimed 14-year-old son. She said, "Let the people see what I've seen." The reason the world saw what she saw was because of another hero in this story, the black press. Jet Magazine, the Chicago Defender, and other black radio and newspapers were unflinching and brave in making sure America saw what she saw. Ida B. Wells once said, and I quote, "The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon the wrongs."
Turning the light of truth upon the wrongs. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580, and we don't black down.
Something new is happening in California's public schools.
They're called community schools.
One of the foundations of community schools is shared decision-making,
where parents and families, students and educators make decisions as one.
Community schools lift the voices of folks that have traditionally been underserved.
Many of our classes are designed around our own students' cultures, their background, their personal experiences.
We bring culturally relevant curriculum to the classroom based on what their specific needs are.
Improving student achievement and innovative classes like cybersecurity and gardening.
And we assist families with their needs.
Some schools have parent education programs, cooking and nutrition classes.
Everything from medical or dental services to immigration law services.
This is a one-stop shop that serves the needs of not just the students, but their families as well.
They're California's community schools, reimagining public education. Paid for by the California Teachers Association.
Life is uncertain. It's okay to feel stressed, anxious, worried, or frustrated. It's normal. With CalHope's free and secure mental health resources, it's easy to get the help you and your loved ones need when you need it the most. Call our warm line at 833-317-4673 or live chat at calhope.org today.
Want your MBA? The California Institute of Advanced Management is the place. An accredited nonprofit institution, we offer dedicated faculty and small class sizes. We're committed to high-impact learning that affects social change and make it easy with no GRE required in a 24-month program of weekend and online classes. Enrolling now for 2023 classes with financial aid and scholarships available. Visit ciam.edu to learn more. That's ciam.edu, the California Institute of Advanced Management. Management that matters.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where everybody is somebody and nobody is a stranger. You belong here.
You belong here. We're glad to have you here on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Tavis Smiley. Our guest in this hour is Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, author of a book out today called Break the Wheel, Ending the Cycle of Police Violence. I suspect for the rest of his life, he'll always be known as the man who successfully prosecuted Derek Chauvin and those other cops for the murder of George Floyd. By the way, the anniversary of that murder is this Thursday, 3 years this Thursday, believe it or not. But prior to becoming AG, I knew him when he was a member of Congress, the first Muslim person elected to Congress. Now there are a few. I'll ask him about that in just a second. He served 6 terms as part of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, later becoming a deputy chair of the Democratic National Committee, so he had a history long before becoming AG, a brilliant history, a great history of work and witness dedicated to our people and to progressive causes. And you are listening, of course, to Unapologetically Progressive Talk Radio, so he fits right in with what we're doing around here. But A.G. Ellison, let me pivot just for a second. We'll come back to the book. You were the first Muslim elected to Congress, but obviously, and I think thankfully not the last. What do you make of that?
Well, it just goes to show that talent comes in all shapes and sizes. I mean, when I started, there was only me. Now there's 3 Muslims in Congress, and 2 of them are women. Andre Carson is on the Intelligence Committee. There were people who were all upset about a Muslim guy like Andre being on the Intelligence Committee, but Andre has a long history of doing intelligence and protecting this country, former police officer. And so he was well qualified. It just goes to show that people always want to figure out a way to exclude somebody, but, they can't do it. And we just got to keep on keeping on. And, I'm going to tell you, I have a special thanks to the Black Caucus, because the Black Caucus, quite honestly, most of them come from a Christian background, but they were always by the side of us who were Muslim. And Andre was a great member, and so was Ilhan Omar, and even Rashida Tlaib, who was Arab American, represents the majority Black community in Detroit. And the Black community, the Black Caucus always said, we're going to defend these people. In fact, when they attacked us, it was Barbara Lee and Maxine Waters. Jim Clyburn was the first ones out the gate writing letters saying, you back off these folks. These are our folks, and they can worship anywhere they want to. And I said, and it made me really proud, So I'll say that, we got a lot of folks who want to serve, and you ought to be able to serve your country, your city, your state, if that is your choice. And your religion shouldn't matter. Your values should. That's what really should matter. But look, man, we have had 6 mosque burnings in Minnesota in the last several months. We're having another spike in hate crimes, and that doesn't even begin to talk about the anti-Asian hate. We've seen an uptick in anti-Semitism, shootings at synagogues, church burnings and shootings. We can't take our eyes off the ball. We've got to keep on pushing for tolerance, inclusion, and we got to prosecute these people who would murder and harm our fellow citizens.
Yeah. What's behind, to the extent that you and your office knows at this point, what's behind these multiple mosque burnings in your state?
Well, I think that there are people who just hate the idea that some people worship different than them. I mean, one group, we caught them. They drove all the way up from Illinois, where they were called the White Rabbit Militia, and they bombed a mosque in Bloomington, Minnesota, bombed it. The world doesn't know much about it. The news didn't even make it out of Minnesota, but took bombs and blew up a mosque. It didn't hurt anybody. Easily could have, though. So what's behind it? Hate. Same things behind Mother Emanuel shooting. Same things behind the Powell High synagogue shooting. And so, look, you're not going to stop Black, Muslim, Jewish, Asian, women. You're not going to stop these people from participating. So you might as well stop being so hateful, because your hate is not going to stop us from moving forward.
No, I love that. I love that. Let me ask, before I get back inside this book here, whether or not, as I sort of intimated a moment ago, the country knows you now as the Attorney General of Minnesota, who successfully prosecuted Derek Chauvin and those other do-nothing cops. You will go down in history. You'll be remembered and highly regarded for successfully leading the team to prosecute those cops. If I know there's a lot more in your future, and I'm ready to support you in it. But if you were known mostly for the rest of your life and for time eternal as the guy who successfully prosecuted these cops, would that be okay with you?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna tell you, man. Tavis, you write about a lot of spiritual topics, and I know you'll understand what I'm saying. I'm just glad God used me to be of service in this situation.
Yes.
I'm not an ambitious person for my own profile. I'm not one who needs to be seen, right? I'm just, my mom, who died March 2020, only a few months before the death of George Floyd, she was a service person. Her father before her was a service-oriented person. And so we're just trying to uphold this family tradition where we try to step up and meet the needs of the community. And, MLK said anybody can be great because anybody can serve.
That's right.
I take that to heart. So whether the world knows me or don't know me, I just want to be a part of service, and I'm glad that I got to be a part of this service.
Yeah. It's a great MLK quote, and because you went there, let me put the rest of it on it, because you know the whole thing. Let's lay the whole thing out, because that last part is as good as the first part. Anybody can be great because anybody can serve. All it takes is a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. That's the whole thing. I love that thing. All it takes is a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. Couldn't nobody put it down like MLK did. Dr. King is a bad man, and I love that particular piece. You mentioned your mother. I mentioned earlier that George Floyd. I can't watch that videotape. George Floyd's on that tape 3 years ago. This Thursday, calling out for his mother. Now I learned that your mother passed just a couple of months before you had to take on this case. How in your state of grieving did you stay focused? He's calling for his mom, and you had just lost your mother. How did you stay focused? And what do you recall when you look back on your diary entries about how you were trying to navigate the case but missing your mama at the same time?
Yeah, man. That's a really good question, because my mom was on my mind throughout this. My mom was raised by some people who really believed in service. My mom would have been absolutely appalled by what happened to George Floyd. She would have been telling me, "What are you going to do about it?" And I mean, that's the kind of woman that she was. My mother was not one of them people who'd say, "Oh, baby, stay out of trouble," because no, she'd be like, I expect you to be trying to do something to help, And you will remember the tragedy of Pulse nightclub. Remember that?
Sure, absolutely. Orlando, Florida.
Yeah. So what happened is, I think I'm right. Correct me if I'm wrong, but John Lewis and them led a group to take over the House floor to protest that mass shooting, and so it was on the news that John Lewis and them was on the House floor. My mom looked at that TV camera and she said, "Well, where's my boy?" She didn't see me down there, so she calls my office and the secretary walks to the door. It's like, "Your mom wants you on the House floor," and I'm like, "Okay, yeah, yes, ma'am." That's my mom.
Yeah, I love that story.
Yeah, so my mom she's about that, man. And the other thing, like my mom, so my family is from Natchitoches Parish, Louisiana. Everybody's Catholic, very Catholic community, Black Catholics. And So she was one of those people who believed that you had to be of service. You had to do right by your neighbor, by your community, by your family. And so she was one of them people who, her dad was organizing black voters in the 50s.
Yeah.
I mean, they were burning crosses across the street from the house. They wouldn't sell my grandfather gasoline. He had to put tractor fuel in his car because he was what they call stirring up a fuss by organizing black voters back in them days. That's the kind of people who raised me, and the expectation is that if there's something to make the world better, that I better be part of it.
Yeah. You're part of a grand legacy, Keith Ellison. You were part of a grand legacy, and your mother sounds like my mother. But I'm tickled by that story. Her son is a member of Congress at the time, and she sees John Lewis and others on the floor protesting this shooting at this nightclub, and she calls his office, "Baby, get your behind down to the floor. I don't see you on C-SPAN on the floor of the house." Only a black mother could do that. As I said, with a heart generated by love, you lead with love. When we come forward, more about this new book out today, Break the Wheel, Ending the Cycle of Police Violence, written by the Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, who you're listening to right now on KBLA Talk 1580.
Be sure to like and follow Tavis Smiley at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues when we come forward.
Reparations Task Force concludes its 15th meeting and votes on its final report, suggesting that upward of $800 billion is owed to black Californians who are descendants of slaves. Maisha Cairo here with your K-Black Minute News, brought to you by CaliforniaBlackMedia.org. The 9-member task force finalized its recommendations for compensating black Californians for state laws, policies, and practices that have disproportionately and negatively affected African Americans. The final report, which will be available to the public, is expected to be about 1,000 pages long. Among the recommendations made, the state of California should issue a formal apology for the perpetration of gross human rights violations and the genocide of Africans who were enslaved and their descendants. The implied admission of guilt should mitigate the harm historically inflicted on the black community, according to members of the task force. U.S. Representative Barbara Lee says reparations are not a luxury for our people, but a human right long overdue for millions of Americans.
Want your MBA? The California Institute of Advanced Management is the place. An accredited nonprofit institution, we offer dedicated faculty and small class sizes. We're committed to high-impact learning that affects social change and make it easy with no GRE required in a 24-month program of weekend and online classes. Enrolling now for 2023 classes with financial aid and scholarships available. Visit ciam.edu to learn more. That's ciam.edu, the California Institute of Advanced Management. Management that matters.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, we're Tasha,
Kill,
and Euro from KBLA's Lyric Lounge.
Check us out every Saturday from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. and every Sunday from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m.
Tune in as we break down some of your favorite song lyrics from all genres of music.
From gospel to pop and hip-hop to rock and everything else in between, we cover it all.
So come hang out in the Lyric Lounge with Tasha,
Teal,
and Euro every Saturday afternoon at 4 p.m. and every Sunday at 6 p.m.
Let the music play.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest bar.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
Broadcasting live from Leimert Park, USA. Welcome back to your home for unapologetically progressive radio, KBLA Talk 1580.
Minnesota AG Keith Ellison, you wrote the book out today, Break the Wheel, Ending the Cycle of Police Violence. So what say you? How would you situate the success of your prosecution of Derek Chauvin and those other officers as part of ending this cycle of police violence? How do you situate that?
I would call it a necessary but insufficient part of the solution. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we'd have lost the case, it would have been a setback in my view. But having won the case, it doesn't get us there, right? I mean, since then we've seen literally hundreds of officer-involved shootings. We've seen the Tyree Nichols matter, which was terrible and just absolutely disgusting. But I'll say this. Us winning that case means that jurors are willing to listen to a prosecution and convict. Jurors are open to it. It means that some prosecutorial offices are stepping up their game, doing more than they did in the past. It means that on the local level and on the state level, we have seen some important legislative advances. But the truth is, Tavis, the numbers have not gone down, brother. They haven't. We just got to be honest about that. The numbers now, just because the numbers haven't gone down doesn't mean nobody's doing anything. People are still trying, but we have not yet pushed this problem down. And we've got to, because one of the biggest problems is not just the loss of life of the victim, and that is the first most important thing, but it is the fact that it erodes trust between police and the communities they are responsible for protecting.
Right.
And if Miss Johnson is like, I don't know if I should call 911 because you know what happened last time. We don't need that. We black communities are often over policed but underprotected. And you talk to a black pastor, it's like, look, I'm the one doing the funerals. I need to be able to have a relationship with the police, but I don't have one because people are scared of them. And people who would commit crimes know this, and it allows them to act even worse. Yeah. So we've got to we got to fix this problem, and it will be. I think it starts with prosecuting people whether they have a badge or not, firing people who violate departmental rules, and then after you do those two things and make sure people can expect that, then you can implement like training and other things that will make a meaningful difference. But at this point, we have not pushed the numbers down. Yeah. I'm disappointed Congress has not stepped up and done its part. It needs to. But, we're not there, brother. Yeah. We're just not.
Let me ask you right quick, watching my clock. I don't want to do three other things right quick. Remind me, what kind of pushback, to the extent you did, what kind of pushback did you get from the police union in prosecuting these officers?
Well, they spent hundreds of thousands, if not millions, to defeat me in my election.
Yeah.
We just won by 20,000 votes. My last election, we won by 100,000 votes. We just won this one by 20,000 votes. And brother, they were running ads against me, calling me a friend of the criminal and all this. My opponent had never stepped foot in a courtroom, never prosecuted a soul. I had prosecuted plenty of criminals who hurt people, and they choose this guy over me. Why? Because I prosecuted Derek Chauvin. This punishment, don't you dare prosecute any of us, no matter how guilty they may happen to be. Yeah. I'm like, I'm sorry. We're gonna prosecute criminals. And Derek Chauvin's he was a criminal more than a cop. I never prosecuted a cop. I prosecuted only criminals. Right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I like that
and
distinction.
If he didn't violate,
yeah.
Right. If the guy he's breaking the law, what do you want?
Yeah.
I believe most police officers want to serve people, help people, protect people. In fact, the chief of police was a great witness in our case. He came forward and denounced what Chauvin did.
Yeah.
And that was great. But what I'd say going forward, we need to get more sergeants, middle managers who will hold police accountable when they commit violations. Derek Chauvin had 18 prior use of force complaints. How did he get to such a high number? And Tavis, he wasn't even in the top 10.
Wow, that right there, that is arresting. Pardon the pun, that he wasn't even top 10. But I hear the distinction that the AG, Keith Ellison, is making between prosecuting cops versus prosecuting criminals. He said, I don't prosecute cops, I prosecute criminals. I love that frame. My friend Connie Rice always says, get your frame right. We're prosecuting criminals, not cops. More of Keith Ellison when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Say the quiet part out loud. KBLA Talk 1580.
Something new is happening in California's public schools.
They're called community schools.
One of the foundations of community schools is shared decision making,
where parents and families, students and educators make decisions as one.
Community schools lift the voices of folks that have traditionally been underserved.
Many of our classes are designed around our own students' cultures, their background, their personal experiences.
We bring culturally relevant curriculum to the classroom based on what their specific needs are.
improving student achievement, and innovative classes like cybersecurity and gardening.
And we assist families with their needs.
Some schools have parent education programs, cooking and nutrition classes.
Everything from medical or dental services to immigration law services.
This is a one-stop shop that serves the needs of not just the students, but their families as well.
They're California's community schools, reimagining public education. Paid for by the California Teachers Association.
As a dentist, I know what my patients are saying when they really can't speak. She says her gums have been bleeding. Is there anything you can do? Absolutely. You can try New Crest Gum Detoxify and Restore. Yup, New Crest Gum Detoxify and Restore is professionally designed to start healing gums from day one. Right. Healthy gums, healthy mouth.
Crest Gum Detoxify and Restore. Smile. Crest has you covered.
The pandemic may be over, but many Angelinos could be at risk of losing the place they call home. It's important to know your rights as a residential renter in the city of LA. Did you know eviction protection still exists for unpaid COVID-19 rental debt that was due before March 31st, 2023? And that you have 5 days to respond to an eviction notice, also known as an unlawful detainer. Learn more about your rental rights at housing.lacity.org. Be informed, be protected, be at home.
Let's unpack a little bit more with Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues right now.
Minnesota AG Keith Ellison said moments ago that our communities are over-policed and yet underprotected. Over-policed and still underprotected. I'm not naive in asking this, AG Ellison, with the 3 or 4 minutes I have left here. But why do you think that persists?
Well, I think one reason it persists is because we've got to organize around safety. I think there's a little bit of reluctance in the black community that insists that we have safety services, public safety, and we have civil and human rights. Black folks have been getting out there protesting, demanding better service, and we've done a great job at it, but I just think we've got to continue our effort to do so. I'm so proud of black communities that have, stopped the violence, ceasefire. All these groups are doing a great job, but public officials have got to step up with some resources and back up these efforts so that we can have those safe communities. At the end of the day, government's supposed to create safe communities. Black communities are not red light district. We have a right to be safe just as much as anyone else. And I think that, it's because of historic neglect and racism, brother. That's the reason why.
Yeah.
But I also think that, we just got to keep on pushing.
I want to ask 2 questions, and I got 2.5 minutes left. What's to be done about the arresting point you made a moment ago that Derek Chauvin wasn't even top 10 of the worst cops on that police department, and yet they were still continuing their service unabated? What's to be done about that?
We need more accountability from the sergeants and the middle managers in these police departments. If they turn a blind eye to police brutality, you will get more of it. They've got to treat it just like any other violation of officer responsibility. If an officer wasn't turning in reports, you do something about that.
Yeah.
Well, if he's being brutal, you got to do something about that too.
Yep.
And if somebody has a bunch of complaints, you got to pull them in and say, "What's going on with you?"
Yeah. What's your take, right quick, on qualified immunity?
Well, I think it's an unnecessary doctrine. I mean, here, just so people know what qualified immunity is, it's a judge-made law which says that unless something like this almost exactly has happened before, then you cannot hold a police officer, or any public official responsible for it. But you can pass administrative rules and pass even laws that say you can't do this. But if you say qualified immunity, it hasn't happened before, we're not going to hold them responsible, you are letting them off the hook for obeying rules. It's a bad doctrine.
Yeah.
Doesn't have any good uses, and I don't support it.
In the 1 minute that I have left, what do you hope the takeaway will be when readers get this book today? It's out today. Break the Wheel, Ending the Cycle of Police Violence. What's the takeaway you hope?
We can do something about this problem, and we must do something about this problem to restore trust, to stop the civil unrest that inevitably follows from it, and, quite frankly, to deal with our municipal budgets. In Minneapolis alone, we've spent over $100 million in the last 10 years on police misconduct cases. Think about L.A., think about New York, think about all the things we could be doing with that money, but instead we're paying out police misconduct cases. for so many reasons, we've got to do something about this problem.
He's Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. We are grateful, delighted, thrilled that he chose KBLA Talk 1580 as one of the places he would speak to on this day, the day his book comes out. It's called Break the Will, Ending the Cycle of Police Violence. The book is out on the eve of the 3rd anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, which we'll commemorate this Thursday right on this station and on this program. A.G. Ellison, I love you, man. Nothing you can do about it. Thank you for your time,
Love
sir.
you, brother. You're the best. See you later.
Talk to you soon. Take care. Hour 3 of Tavis Smiley when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. California's Bay Area will soon be home to the world's largest semiconductor tech site. It's being built by the manufacturing company Applied Materials in Sunnyvale. That's where Vice President Kamala Harris visited yesterday to reveal the news. She says semiconductors are the brain of modern technology, calling the tiny chips essential to every electron depression, anxiety, and other problems in the nation's teenagers. Murthy's advisory urges policymakers and social media platforms